Hello everybody. It is 3:30, which of course means it is time for one of our after-school STEM shows. If you haven't been following us, these are shows that we've been doing every single day, pretty much every single day, whenever technical difficulties don't prevent us from doing it. Every single day at 3:30 for the last, 6-7 months at this point. So basically the way this goes is one of the educators from here at the Science Center picks some sort of topic and we talk about it for 15, 20, depending on the topic. Every once in a while it might stretch out to, I've had like hour-long ones. I'm the longest-winded guy in the building. So we'll see what we get today. Today is kind of a unique one in that we actually have a live audience in the building. We don't always have that. So for our Twitch audience out there and our other internet audience, might be hearing some questions coming from folks off camera, and those are our audience that we have here in person. And if you are interested in coming and seeing one of these in person, we are open right now from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday from 9:30 to 5 on the Friday, Saturday, and Monday, and then on the Sunday we are open from 1 to 5. But starting very soon, so starting basically after this next coming week, so Friday the 4th, we are going to open up, and then from that Friday the 4th on, we are going to be open 7 days a week. So if you're interested in coming and visiting us, we're going to be open a lot more often coming up here very shortly once we're done with field trip season, basically. Also, big thanks to the Beltrami Electric Co-op. They gave us a very generous donation that has been underwriting a lot of these shows, so big shout outs to them. And with no further ado, I think we're going to hop right into it. So, the reason I am doing this topic today, which today we are talking about turtles and tortoises, is because of this lady right here. And so this is our desert tortoise, which those of you who have visited us here at the Science Center have maybe seen her, pet her down on the exhibit floor. And one of the things I noticed when I came in today is that she had pee. And so it is not a common thing for her to pee. She doesn't go to the bathroom very much because she comes from a very, very dry environment, and so retaining water is a big thing for them. And so oftentimes you will see that they won't pee unless they are like already in a water source. And so peeing for them can be kind of a big deal because, like I said, in the environment they live in, it's hard to replace that water. And so oftentimes you'll see it's something that they mostly only do for like a defense thing. But every once in a while, like, you gotta go. It just happens. So here, it's hard to say. Like I said, she gets interacted with by a bunch of people a lot of times. It's not completely out of bounds. That's, some person could have come up and spooked her enough that she peed to startle that person away. But like I said, a lot of times it's just a matter of like, yeah, it's been 2 weeks since I went, so I gotta pee now. So one of the things that you'll see us do regularly here, and if you come by, you might see us doing this, is something similar to this, where we just have a tub of water out, and we sit there and we just give her a soak. And like I said, a lot of times they won't go to the bathroom unless they are like already in water. You'll even see, like, if you go down and visit her exhibit, you'll see that she has a water dish down there, but honestly, it's mostly for show for the guests because people get upset if they don't have a water dish. She never drinks out of that water dish. Like, they genuinely barely even recognize it as water unless they can, like, walk into it, basically. And so, like I said, usually you'll see us doing this about once a week where we'll take her out and just give her a soak for about, 15, 20 minutes, which happens to be about the length for these shows, so I thought it was a convenient thing here. And so we've got her soaking in a tub of our RO wastewater, which is an interesting type of water that you're not going to probably have around your house. So we have a very special water system here that we use for getting water for our fish tanks. And a byproduct of that is that it makes what we call this wastewater. And this wastewater is kind of mineral fortified, but it also doesn't have any chlorine in it, which is good for these guys because we don't want them drinking chlorine. But the mineral stuff is actually good for some of the critters. So a lot of the drinking water that we see our animals having in their water dishes is this stuff. But just backstory on her, she is actually a wild-born tortoise. We have had her here for like 10, maybe 12 years now. It's hard to keep track. But she's actually a wild-born tortoise, and she came to us because she lost a foot out in the wild. And so if you come up and visit with her here in a little bit, you'll see her back right foot is missing. She has a little stump back there, but there's no foot at the end of it. These guys are they like to dig. In fact, one of the names you'll see for these guys a lot of times is gopher tortoises. Because they like to dig so much, basically. And so if you look at her feet, look at her claws, you'll see that she has these big, long claws on all of them. And those claws are predominantly for digging. And so missing out on that clawed foot is kind of a problem for them when it slows down their digging out in the wild. And so she was one where it was decided that she wasn't a good option to be re-released back out in the wild, and so she ended up in a place like this. And like I said, we've had her here for several years at this point. One other kind of interesting thing about her that she shows off more than any of the other turtles or tortoises I've got up here is you can see the scoots on her back. And scoots is a word you may or may not have heard before, but we call these plates that make up the tortoise's shell, we call those scoots. And you'll notice they all kind of have these like kind of ring pattern around them. And in the case of this particular tortoise, those are actually growth rings. So she puts on one of those every growth season. And so you can actually count those and get a pretty decent idea of how old she is. It's not a perfect measure because they actually shed a little bit off the top as well. But the other thing that's kind of cool about it is if you have a little imagination, you can take a look at, you know, where the top of those little pyramids are. And if you mash those all together, that's how big she was, you know, maybe 15, 16 years ago. So kind of a cool thing to think about. But again, I'm going to try and bug her as little as I can here going forward. So like I said, what I'm hoping she's going to do here is sit in this water, hang out for a little while, and what I really want to see her start doing is drinking. And when she drinks, she'll generally just like plunge her whole head in the water and you'll see her throat going. It's kind of a cool thing to watch if she actually does it, but she doesn't do it every time. Like I said, she peed this morning, so I'm hoping that she's going to sit up here and drink for me for a little while. I'm going to scooch her off to the side. And I think we're just going to talk a little bit about turtles and tortoises in general. And I brought up, let's see, did I bring up every single living turtle we have in this building? I think I did. And as well as a few other non-living specimens here. I think we'll just go through and visit with them. So, I'll throw this question out to the audience. What's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? Yep.
One's amphibian, one lives on land.
Yeah, so use the term amphibian. Amphibious is probably what you mean there, where you're saying turtles particularly tend to spend some portion of their life in water, whereas tortoises are pretty much exclusively terrestrial. And that's generally the answer you get with them is it's more of a behavioral thing than it is an actual biological thing, where you know there might be tortoises that are more closely related to certain types of turtle than certain types of turtles are related to another. But it's, like I said, it's interesting, and that's a distinction we make that's not really based on biology so much as it is based on behavior, which isn't a thing you see in very many places anymore. Another kind of unique, similar thing that you see is frogs and toads. What's the difference between a frog and a toad? Functionally, toads are the ugly ones. It's basically the extent of it. If it's bumpy and ugly, we call it a toad. If it's smooth, we call it a frog. It's really all it is. There's not a whole lot of biology behind it. But this one I'm bringing up next is kind of an interesting one in that this is something that we call a turtle that really doesn't spend much, if any, of its time in the water. They like moist areas, but you're not going to see this guy like swimming ever. And this is called a three-toed box turtle. And a lot of people have heard of box turtles. This particular one is a species that you would find in like south central United States, kind of in the like Kansas, Missouri area is sort of where they're most associated with this particular species. But there's a bunch of different types of box turtles. And what you might have seen happen there was she pooped when I picked her up. And that, I think, was just a genuine, I gotta poop waste dump. One of the things that will happen a lot of times when I pick this particular turtle up is she will do a big pee and poop dump all over me. Why don't you do that? What's the value of doing that?
She's scared.
Yeah, so when you scare a thing and it pees all over you, like it's a common thing. You know, you ever pick up frogs in the wild? They pee all over you. Little turtles you pick up in the wild, they pee all over you. You know, how many times have you seen the gag in an old cartoon where somebody gets scared and you hear the little bell noise and it's like meant to imply like, yep, he peed himself. It's a thing that has been a gag for as long as I've been watching cartoons, my whole life. And so it's a thing that is kind of a near universal within the animal kingdom, and what it is a defense mechanism because, you know, just like I don't want to touch that poop, neither does a coyote. And so basically what that type of thing is doing is saying like, hey, I don't think I can like win a fight here. I think I might get killed and eaten. So what I'm going to do, rather than trying to fight this thing, is I'm just going to make this situation gross and hope it leaves. And so, like I said, it works. A lot of animals do it. And they do it because it works. But also interesting with her, and another cool thing with box turtles in particular, is kind of the defining feature, obviously, with a lot of turtles is the shell. That's like the thing we think about when we think about a turtle, is that they have a shell. And I would maybe argue that box turtles have the most effective defensive shell of any type of turtle. So part of that is they have the benefit of being a land-based turtle, so there's some intricacies to the shape of the shell that being a land-based thing has over being an aquatic-based thing as far as like the protective force of it. But box turtles in particular are really unique in that if you look at the bottom of the shell, and the bottom of a turtle's shell is called the plastron, you'll see a line going across it right here. And what's really cool about that line is if she really wants to, you can see she can kind of suck herself into her shell, and that line is actually like a hinge. And so she can actually close her shell in the front and back to fully enclose herself in a way that I don't know of any other turtles that can do besides box turtles. Similar thing that you'll see like our desert tortoise here, Sunny, doing is if you look at her front legs, you'll see there's these big heavy scales on the front of it. And so when she really wants to suck inside her shell, she can suck her head in and then put her legs in front of her, and she's got these big scales on her forearms that are also protective in a similar way. You can compare that to something like our snapping turtle, for example. And you look at this one's plastron, and one, it's not nearly as big. So the bottom part is here, and it flares out a little bit and then gets narrow again. But you'll see she's about as sucked inside her shell as she can get right now. And she's not very well protected. There's a nice little head there that I could nip at if I was a fox or whatever that was looking to get at her. And so this is the reason why you see snapping turtles tend to be pretty ornery, pretty aggressive when they're out of the water, is because they really don't have any other option for protecting themselves. I'm not worried ever about getting bit by this turtle, because when this turtle gets scared, it doesn't bite me. It hides inside its shell and pees all over the place. This one, because it can't run away, because it can't hide in its shell, option C is I'm going to try and fight pretty much anything that comes close to me. And you'll see snapping turtles have this very kind of negative, very mean reputation, because normally when we encounter them, it's when they're out of the water and they're at their most vulnerable. The other thing that prevents them from being particularly good at hiding inside their shells, they have a very, very long neck, which you'll see anytime she's feeding or when she's in her actual tank and the water's a little bit deeper and she wants to come up and take a breath. You'll see she'll just sit on the bottom and like snake her head all the way up and poke her nose out and suck it back down. So the long neck hampers her ability to get inside of her shell too, but it's really handy for, like I said, breathing and also eating for these guys. So the other thing that I mentioned is the shape of the shell is pretty important. And the shape of the shell is something that can tell you a lot about the lifestyle of a turtle. So this particular turtle, no clue what species it is. It's been one of the great mysteries of the Science Center for as long as I've been here, is what kind of turtle is this from? I don't know. Can tell you it is very likely a terrestrial turtle because of the shape of it. And you can compare these two shells, for example. So this is a shell from actually a red-eared slider, so the same type that is in my thing here, versus this one. And one of the things you'll notice is that this one's quite a bit flatter on top, whereas this one's kind of big and domed. And that's for the sake of swimming, basically. This shape is a lot better for traveling through water than this shape is. Trade-off, of course, is that this shape's a lot easier to pick up and is a lot less resistant to smashing than this shape is. So from a pure, like, I'm trying to be a living tank and walk around and just not get crushed, this is a much better shape than this one is. But for the aquatic turtles, where you're dealing with smaller predators for the most part in the water than you are on land for most of these local turtle species, but also your have mobility is more of a concern, you end up seeing the trade-off happen, and this ends up being worth it. And you see this type of shape in pretty much every type of turtle that spends a decent amount of time in the water. And obviously you can see it in our sea turtle here too. It does not have a very domed shell. It's pretty flat on the back. And yeah, it's for swimming. So, what was it? That's it. And so we have the other part that's kind of interesting is talking about the structure of the shell. I mentioned that they have the scoots on the back, and those scoots are kind of cool. The scoots are made of the same type of stuff your fingernails are made out of. It's called keratin. And there's a ton of stuff that's made out of keratin out there in the world. Your hair is made of keratin, your fingernails are made out of keratin. If you touched a snake skin today at any point, that was fully made out of keratin, just a lot thinner than any of this stuff. Horse hooves and all that stuff is keratin. But internally, there is bone in the turtle shell. And so if you look inside of a shell, and maybe this one will be an easier view for folks because it's a little bit bigger, you catch it at just the right angle, you can actually see the turtle's backbone running up the inside of the shell there because it's part of the skeleton. And so the turtle shell, structurally, the backbone is the middle, but the rest of it is ribs and sternum is what makes up the rest of it. And then, like I said, there's a little layer of skin in between, and then it's a layer of keratin on the outside that, like I said, is constantly growing. And so what I have here actually is some of that bone that you're seeing, and this is from a snapping turtle, much bigger snapping turtle than what we have. But you can see it's two separate bones, but they fit together very, very tightly here with just what we would call a suture, so they're kind of friction fit. So this is like the same type of seam you would see like between the plates that make up our skull, for example, make up the turtle shell, except it's ribs for them rather than our head plates. So kind of cool. They just have these big wide ribs that all, I don't know if fused together is exactly the right word, but like I said, kind of friction fit together in such a way that holds them all in one piece. And then they grow the, like I said, the keratin on the outside of it. The last turtle I have here that I have not mentioned at all yet is this little fella here. Fellow or lady, hard to tell. And they're this little. And this one's a local. This is our newest. I guess we have a frog that's newer, but one of our newest critters here at the Science Center. And you won't see this one on the floor just yet. So whenever we get new critters here at the Science Center, the first thing we always do is we put them in a little quarantine space. Especially ones that are wild-born like this one. We don't want them bringing in like diseases that any of these other critters is going to be potentially catching by keeping them in close proximity to one another. And so that one is a painted turtle. And so that's the turtle where if you go out and just look at any old log floating in any of the lakes around here, these are the turtles that are all over the top of it. More often than not are the painted turtles. Far and away the most common turtle you see around here. They're called pond turtles, mud turtles, a million different names for them. I guess I grew up calling painted turtles. And like I said, that one's interesting because it's so new, because it's so young. That turtle is maybe, how long have we had it even? It's only a few weeks old, let's put it that way. And so that one's gonna hopefully be here and keep growing, and painted turtles going to be maybe 30 or so. So like I said, if everything goes great for that turtle, you might be able to come back 25, 30 years from now and see that same turtle. And he is currently marked. Our kind of hope for him is if you saw the bog tank down on the exhibit floor that has all the carnivorous plants in it, the sphagnum moss. We want to try and put some critters in there to help kind of keep the ecosystem circulating a little bit. We need somebody in there pooping, basically, is the long and short of it. And so we're hoping that this guy and maybe a couple frogs that we can throw in there can help out that tank a little bit. And our last one, I guess I briefly mentioned this one, but one that you can also see, this one guy lives upstairs here at the Science Center, is our red-eared slider. This is Vinny. And you can see why they call them red-eared sliders if he bothers to poke his head out. So they have kind of a red spot on the side of their head, right about where their ears would be. And these guys are kind of interesting because this is a species of turtle that does live around Bemidji, but they're not supposed to. They're an invasive species around here. And they've just very recently, like within the last year or so, like officially been designated as like an invasive species that has a breeding population here. So there's kind of a steps with this where you're like, okay, these critters are around, but there's not enough of them to like self-sustain, and if we just quit adding more, they'll go away. These guys have recently like cleared that hurdle where we're like, okay, even if we stop putting painted or red-eared sliders in the lakes, we're just going to have red-eared sliders around here. And they're a turtle that, like I said, is very closely related to the painted turtle, does a lot of the same stuff as the painted turtle, just gets a little bit bigger. So having these guys around is, as far as most of the critters in the lake are concerned, probably not that big of a deal, because like I said, they're just doing the same stuff the painted turtles do, basically. But for the painted turtles, they're a huge problem because they're doing the same stuff the painted turtles do, except now they're bigger. It's the same issue that we have with like the rusty crayfish, where it just comes in and bullies out the native crayfish and replaces them, basically. And so, interesting little invasive species there. And they're an invasive because they're very popular as pets, basically. They're far and away the most popular pet turtle out there. I've even seen them getting given away at like county fairs and stuff like that. You know, you throw the ping pong ball into the fish bowl or whatever, and oh, you get a turtle for it. Definitely the species that we get offered the most here. One of the things that does happen here is that people will call us and say, hey, I've got such and such critter, do you guys want to take it? And every once in a great while, we do say yes. That's actually the case with this little painted turtle here. We did say yes to a call like that. But generally, we're going to say no to that specifically because we kind of don't want to be a place that people like think they can come in and, for lack of a better word, dump their unwanted pets. But every once in a while, if we have a really specific need, like I said, if we knew we were looking for a turtle to put into that tank, and the call just happened to come at just the right time, we were like, yeah, okay, we can make that work, I think. And so that's how this guy ended up here. But like I said, if you have something like that, feel free to call, but absolutely expect us to say no when you do call. Worth the call. I'm not mad to get the call, but don't be upset when I say no. Meanwhile, I haven't been looking at her, but I noticed she's kind of dunking her head over here. Haven't seen her drink yet, but the fact that she's kind of submerging herself is a good sign as far as her actual drinking goes. Does anybody want to come up and visit with any of these little turts that we got and say hi to them, get a touch, get a visit in? So a lot of these are critters that we don't let you pet out on the exhibit floor. You know, you don't actually get a chance to visit with the painted turtle. She just lives in a tank that you never get to go into. So unique opportunity here for those of us who are here live. But for those of you who are here on the internet, thank you for watching. I think we are going to call it a wrap there. Again, remember, our schedule is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday from 9:30 to 5, and then 1 to 5 on Sundays, but soon to be 7 days a week. 9:30 to 5, except for Sundays is going to stay 1 to 5. Again, thank you to Beltrami Electric Co-op. Tomorrow's show, I honestly have no idea what it's going to be. I'm not going to be here for it. Probably be Angie, I think. Anyway, tune in. Like I said,